Welcome to the second edition of Downhill Trains. In this edition, we're going to do it slightly differently. We are going to get down to the nuts and bolts of building a layout. Did I say nuts and bolts? No, I've got it all wrong. It's about plywood and still more plywood. But without any further ado, I'm going to move over to a slideshow showing how the layout was built. But just before that, do stay until the end because there are a couple of important announcements at the end of the video. Enjoy!
Before starting with the build, I put together a 1/5 scale diorama, just using strips of cardboard mounted on blocks of wood and the gaps in between filled with dressmaker's batting. This was just to see what it would look like. Would it look anything like the prototype? Well, looking at it, it looked very much like a snow-covered mountain scene in the Alps of Europe. So I splashed a bit of paint on it to give it a more realistic look of the steep hillsides that the rails had to follow. This was still far more than what I needed, far more than what the actual prototype looked like. But I had doubled the gradients. I'd used an 8% on the 1883 and a 4% on the double lines of the latter years. So I was quite happy to go back to the original design at half the gradients on the diorama. On the diorama you can see on the right bottom corner the upper and lower rails go off to the right of the layout. I did this just to see what the effect would be if another meter or so space was available to extend the layout in that direction. And now it was time to performance test the locomotives pulling trains on the sharp radius of the 1883 line and the more gentle curvature of the latter lines. Also included on these tests was by tilting the board, one could test the performance on different gradients. Being satisfied that gradients between 2 and 5% were acceptable, it was decided to go ahead and plan the layout. And now it's plywood time. These are the packing cases. Did I say boxes? No, not boxes. These are just skeletons of boxes, and that's all that's required to support the layout and eventually carry the modules. The strips are cut from 18mm shutterboard and are 50mm wide, except for some 70mm strips used in the vertical legs. And here's the detail of a top corner. The piece going down at 7 o'clock is the L-shaped support leg, as made of two pieces, one 70mm and one 50mm. The pieces going out to 2 o'clock and 11 o'clock are the cross pieces, which are just 50mm wide. It's all that's necessary to hold it rigid. No glue has been used at any place. The whole lot is just held together with screws. That makes it easy to disassemble in case changes need to be made at any time. What looks like a split in the plywood there is not actually a split, it's a manufacturing defect in the board. these boards are full of these small defects because they are designed for shuttering purposes and are cheaply made and cheap to buy. Another advantage of cutting strips from these 4x8 shutterboard sheets is that after cutting it all, I landed up with a bucket full of sawdust that can be used for flocking in the future. A point of interest: South Africa converted to the metric system in the late 60s, but continued to manufacture timber sections to the standard inch sizes. They were given metric equivalent labels. It is only recently that timber is actually cut to metric sizes. Boards are still manufactured to the standard 4x8 foot sizes and also are given metric labels. To convert millimeters to inches, just divide by 25. To complete the support structure, 4 longitudinal sections 70 millimeters wide were screwed to the cases, to which was added 2 cross sections, one at each end, thus completing the support structure. And this brings us to the module bases, which were made out of 9mm 5-ply pine plywood. Seen here is module number 1 at the left back side of the layout. To the extreme left of this module is a dark wood. This was a piece of hardwood ply that I used, as I was short of pine ply. Underneath the plywood can be seen 50mm battens going all the way round and at strategic places underneath it in order to connect it to the support frame and to make it stable. If one looks carefully on the right hand side of this module, there is an opening where there is no batten. The batten had still to be placed there. And then halfway to the back where the dog leg is, this is where a track crosses over. Module 4 had the highest length and width of all the modules, and this set the size for the packing cases. The depth of the packing cases was set by the distance between the hole in the middle of the layout to the back and to the front of the layout. As modules 1 and 4 were the tallest, this made them candidates for the deeper packing case number 2. Strips of wood were fitted into the packing cases, making 2 areas of equal depth, onto which the modules could be slid and fastened using wood screws. In this enlarged section of the picture, the dog leg in module 4 can be seen, which allows the track to pass from module 1 to module 4 in the direction of 11 o'clock to 5 o'clock. And here we have the layout with all the modules in place, a layout that's rather cluttered with building materials, as building of the track bed for the spiral commences. The flat metal plates anchoring the modules to the support frame are seen here. On the right front corner of the layout on module 6, we see another use of plywood. The support blocks of 18mm thick shutter ply are hot glued onto the base, and the track bed of 9mm plywood is screwed down onto the mounting blocks. The track was laid on the base level of module 6 and onto the first level of the spiral, as it would be difficult to do this once the spiral had been built further. Vertical support legs were added to the support blocks of the bottom spiral, and the top spiral was then screwed to these support legs. The snake-like oval at the top is the support for the cover over the spiral, which can be removed to get into the spiral should a train ever derail. Track building continued on to Module 4 at the right back side of the layout. As before, the track was screwed onto vertical blocks which were hot glued to the base. The N3 National Road from Durban to Johannesburg is portrayed here by the steeply graded strip moving from about the middle of the picture to the right, passing over the rail bed. To the left of the National Road were two tunnels. As can be seen, plywood sides were put on these tunnels to stop a derailed train from toppling into the void below. At the top of the left-hand tunnel can be seen a plywood lid frame. The lid was there to enable access to the tunnel in case needed. The surface of the top and mountain sides is supported by plywood ribs made from 6mm plywood. 6mm being quite adequate, as a little bit of bending or warping will not affect the running of the trains. To the right of the picture can be very clearly seen the National Road climbing steeply up the mountainside. And so the track building progressed, from Module 4 moving to the left towards Module 1. What you might find puzzling is these little plywood fingers sticking up into the air. Well, those are the height gauges for each module. The maximum height at which anything fixed on the module may reach. If that's exceeded, the module will not fit into the packing cases when it comes time to transport it. 2 years into the build, and it was time to relocate. Time to disassemble the layout. Time to box the modules. Before committing to the move, I made sure that the second bedroom at the new address would accommodate the layout. The modules were fixed into their packing cases. All that remained was to put a sheet of plywood on the right-hand side of this packing case to protect the modules, and then the modules would be ready for the road. After a 350-mile road trip over some rough roads, and being transshipped for the last couple of miles, as the retirement village could not accommodate the big van, the packing cases eventually arrived in the new train room.
Okay, now you've seen the announcements. The layout was packed up and it was transported to a new destination. And in the very next episode, we will video unpacking and putting together the layout. And if you've enjoyed it, please press the like button. And if you haven't subscribed, do so. And press that bell, because pressing the bell will give you a notification of when the next episode comes out. Be good.